All the audio is working. Yes, it is. Hey, welcome everybody. Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. Today we have over here on the West Coast, Serena Catania. All the way from the UK, Alex Gollner.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
From Texas, who has some of the leanest restrictions in the nation, Tony Gallardo. And
howdy.
Right below me is Bill Davis from California as well. Alex was just looking at you, Tony. He looked over to you.
I have to look past.
Sorry.
The other way, Tony. Tony, there you go.
Yeah, it's hard
There
to
you
know
go.
where to look on these.
What's up, Alex?
So
You know, it's funny.
I'm looking
Yeah.
past Bill to you. So if this is looking at Bill,
There you
Hey,
go.
Bill, and this is me looking at you, Tony. That's how it
There you
works.
go.
And then... anyway,
Audio cues help me
I'm
out a
gonna
lot. Thank you.
I'm going to turn that off.
This Zoom geometry lesson has been brought to you by...
So we have five of it. We have a lot of comments. Tangier. We got a comment, Jari Innanen from Hello Richard, and guest from Helsinki, Finland.
Hi, Yari.
Hey.
He was
Hi,
at NAB last year, right, Jari? I think I remember you there.
Absolutely.
So, Tony, what's happening in Texas these days?
Well, thankfully, I'm still able to barbecue, so that's
important.
Really good. That's very important. I did my first real brisket on my own 2 weeks ago, so I'm kind of proud of that. I need a lot of practice, and I have a lot to learn, but it came out great.
So you
And
You're
Alex-
lucky you can buy meat. We can't even get brisket here.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
No.
Our grocery store chain, HEB, has done a really phenomenal job of just keeping the flow of traffic and letting everybody know when are the best times to go shopping, and online versus in store, and putting all the PPE and stuff in place at all their stores. So thankfully it's been pretty good. We're back to
Luckily,
mostly normal.
I get my meat every month from Keller Crafted. So luckily I get
Sign. That's, I think, that's the new normal.
I'm just going to let mine grow until it just keeps getting
Yeah,
frowier and
I do
frowier.
my own too. I cut my own too.
It's been a combination, but in Maryland, they are opening up what they call phase 1 tonight at 5 o'clock. They shut it down at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and then the governor came on, Governor Hogan. You've probably seen him on the news. He has come back in, and tonight at 5 o'clock, they're going to open it up, everything except for theaters, gyms, and one other thing. I forget what it was. One other restaurants. Everything else is pretty much opened, still observing social distancing, wearing masks indoors and stuff. So I'm going to go down Main Street, Sykesville, and do a live stream from down there to see what's going on.
It's definitely weird going to a restaurant and just the nature of having a mask on. But for the past 2 months or so, we've all been quarantined and super cautious of everything and aware. I had a shoot on Monday, my first shoot since COVID, and it was really weird just going to a restaurant and seeing people in a restaurant and sitting down. Everybody was wearing masks and social distancing, but it's just kind of strange. So it's definitely going to be different going back.
Absolutely. It's strange. I go out like on Saturdays typically when I do my minimal shopping and all. So I have my camera now, my iPhone, mounted on my car. So I can film as I'm driving, and I go by the Walmart and see the line with people. And it's really like a science fiction movie.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, what's it like? I know I've seen it at London, UK. It's pretty vacant. It seems like, right?
Yeah, I happen to be on live on one of the most busiest roads leading out of London, so it's a little busier than most other roads. There's quite a lot of people individuals getting exercise on the streets most of the time, and corner stores are open and supermarkets are open, but not restaurants and not cinemas, theaters, or places like that. So there are lines outside lots of places with markings that are actually out on the sidewalk, marking the gaps where people are supposed to stand, and that's what people do. So we'll see. I think most of the time you're looking around and thinking there's quite a lot of people out here. It feels strange that there's so many people out. And that's some of the days. And then other days it feels like it feels like it's about the traffic for 1 or 2 in the morning on the main freeway, but it's at 3 in the afternoon. So we'll see what happens.
One of the comments, if you see it, James Wells says, "Who can lip read?" Because I switched scenes and the audio was muted for just a second, so we didn't have any audio. So his comment is, "Who can lip read?" Let me know in the comments I have meters over here for myself and for the Skype guests, and I switched scenes and I don't know. Whatever. So we have a lot.
It's complicated. What you're doing, Richard, is complicated. And people who, I've been participating in a hangout kind of a thing with a lot of very, very good engineering types. And Alex has been there a couple of times. And the amount of infrastructure they're using to put what is normally a Zoom that has probably 200 people watching it consistently live. And there are, I think, something like 25 to 35 of us kind of on stage, following the behind the scenes chatter about what it takes to put that on. It's not trivial. And so the fact that any of this works is a minor miracle. And I think we should be very lucky because.
Well, that's true.
Imagine going through all this, quarantining the rest of this with nothing but broadcast TV to keep you company. That would be,
standard def even.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or, books, hopefully, if you had books. Man, can you imagine doing it during the Spanish flu one where people just had the place that they lived and not much in the way of entertainment stuff at all? Right.
So, Serena, you've been busy. You've been doing some stuff. Tell me about it. The podcast?
I think I don't know. It just seems like I'm busier now than I have been in a long time. The OWC Radio Podcast, that's been keeping me really busy. We did a sweepstakes with FCP.co last week, and we're getting ready for Post-Production World. I'm not speaking this year. Are you speaking, Richard?
No, I don't do those. That requires work. If I do a presentation, I have to write it and prepare it and do the slideshows or whatever. I mean, just like when we used to teach. When I teach for Future Media Concepts, I'm standing in front of an audience for 8 hours a day. Yeah. 2 and 3 days a week. I have to prepare that stuff. It's just the way I am. So I don't like doing that kind of work. I mean, I like it.
I was recording Philip a couple days ago. We're going to put out some lumberjack tutorials. We're working on those, OWC Radio, and all my other docs that I'm catching up on. And you know what? Working from home is tough because you have to set everything up.
Sure.
It's not like walking into a studio and I still, like I told you this morning, I still can't get the NDI camera to work properly on a Mac, so I need help with that. But other than that, it's great. I love my garden.
Yeah, you're going to do the garden thing. My girlfriend's got a garden. I'm going to put up some videos for her. So, Alex, are you working video production-wise in London right now? Are you editing and stuff? Or?
Well, in the last couple of years, I've been making much more plugins for folks. So I've been busy as normal, slightly busier than this time of the year, than this time last year, actually, and as busy as I was 2 years ago. So what I'm doing is making plugins, but custom ones for people who need specific things for websites or services and stuff like that. So the work that I've done hasn't really changed in that respect, apart from the fact that the meetings I do and the initial conversations I have with people have just been on Zoom. as opposed to going and visiting their offices. So I've been very lucky. I can do all the plugins myself, and I can have everything briefed to me. And they brief me in After Effects because that's how most kind of TV graphic designers think. They implement in After Effects, but then I take that and then I make plugins in Motion, recreate them all completely, and then they work in Final Cut. So that's what I've been doing for the last few months, really.
So that's pretty darn good. Then I think all of us here in this chat have been pretty lucky because we can work from home and work
hugely. I mean, we're a group of people who didn't have to figure out how to work from home. We were there already, essentially, with operations that were reasonably tuned. I don't think anybody expected to have to go, be ready to go live 24/7 all the time and be able to hop in and get a crisis call from a client or something like that and just pop up and go, here's how I can do all the work I used to do. So we're very lucky in that. I have heard tales from my corporate contacts about big companies that are sending out packages with thousands of webcams and audio patches and trying to tell their people how to work remotely in this new era. And so those initiatives are very difficult for large corporations to deploy.
Yeah, and then all the etiquettes as well that they have to learn. They're not used to dealing with live streaming and patching audio. That's got to be crazy.
Right, and we did, for example, we did a huge, one of my larger clients, we did probably 100 headshots, white background headshots for their websites about a month and a half before this all hit. And so now the people who weren't available during that, we went on site and set up strobes and a whole lighting environment and did both still shots of each person. And so you have to manage all of that. You got 30 or 40 frames and somebody has to pick it, then they have to come back and we have to, precisely retouch them and then knock out their background so that they're 100% and the rest of that. But they did that right before this all came down. And now we've got people who were not there who are straggling in and saying, well, send me something. And we're trying to integrate that into a consistent corporate look, and it's very difficult. So we were stupid lucky to have done that right before this all happened, because now those are the banners that all these people are using for their remote things, and they look very professional and they're top notch. But man, and I'm set up here in the studio. I could theoretically have someone come in, but that's just the local people. That's only people who are where I am.
Sure.
So I don't know how things like corporate headshots will get done going forward when you can't send a camera crew in very easily anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So as the listeners are listening today, send in your wish list items for the next version of Final Cut 10.5. I started a poll on a couple of Facebook groups, and of course, everybody has their different, it's interesting how they have different segments, and sometimes people will get an argument, oh, I don't want that, I want this, and they'll argue over which one of the features should be incorporated in Final Cut Pro. So the people that are listening, go ahead and place them in the comments, and we'll pull them up here as we go. So what has happened in the world of Final Cut Pro? When Logic 10.5 came out Tuesday, was it? Yeah, Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Who was caught off guard by that? I mean, I was. You weren't?
Sure.
I wasn't expecting that.
I was expecting it, no.
Logic, no. I mean, usually I think that Final Cut Pro gets updated and then Logic follows, typically, I think. In my memory, when I'm on Twitter, it seems like, I know they go close to each other, but usually I thought Final Cut went first.
Well, I think it's up to the team in Germany. I think they're based in Germany.
I agree.
And I think to some extent that even though Apple is not supposed to reflect industry events, they're still the same people who are working on the same bit of software for the last 10 years, and they still think in the same cycles. And it's quite likely they were just ready, and they were just ready for the cycle of when they were going to do their next release. Just like in June last year, 1 week after the announcement of what was going to be the name of Catalina and features relevant to the Mac Pro, then a version of Logic Logic Pro X comes out a week after WWDC, and the next Final Cut update was in October last year. So who knows? Maybe some aspects of Catalina not working very well were much more affecting Final Cut's update and didn't really affect Logic's update. Maybe Logic relies less on the OS, and the video applications team have been slightly affected by the how wonderful Catalina is.
Well, that, and also you have to remember that at the Grammys this year, obviously Billie Eilish kind of swamped through that thing and just took everything down. And I think it's widely acknowledged that her brother Phineas works in Logic and mastered a lot of that stuff there. So there was a huge profile spike for Logic on a Mac because of that global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Now you turn around and everybody's locked down, and Apple all of a sudden puts Logic out for free, essentially, 90-day trial without any cost. So you've got the confluence of those two things, and now there's a brand new version. Plus, have any of you guys ever seen Edgar Rothermike's, I'm horribly messing, his visual guides? They're extraordinarily good. So somebody can get free Logic, get Edgar's training for it, which is brilliant, and really come up to speed, I think, incredibly quickly on a very powerful tool that's making planetary class content.
Absolutely. He has been on Final Cut Pro Radio before. I've had him on.
Cool.
Great guy. So, yeah. Plus, I get it's Ding Ding Music, and they're the GEM, Graphically Enhanced Manuals. He just put out one for Logic 10.5.
I just saw it. It came across my feed just hours ago, and I thought we should talk about that because none of us, I don't know about you, Richard, but I'm completely disconnected from him or anything he does. I just admired his work. He had a visual graphic enhanced manual for Final Cut that I thought he did a really, really good job on.
He did. That's what I had him on the show for. That's what I had him on the show for. Yeah. Here's something that's interesting. There is speaking of him, because he had it out like the same day or the day after Logic 10.5 came out, so he probably had a beta version. There was somebody on Twitter that said, hey, we've been testing the beta version of Logic Pro 10.5 for months now. And they came out publicly and said that. I thought that's weird. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
are they allowed to say that?
I don't think so. I mean, Final Cut Pro for sure. You can't say that
kind of environment now. I mean, when everybody is zoomed and connected and all the rest of that, I think security is going to have to flex a little bit in here because it's going to be hard. You know, everybody has rumors. I mean, Richard, you've been rumoring, which I think has been very grounded in reality, that of course 10.5 is imminent. Now, imminent may mean weeks or months or whatever.
Well, yeah, I said by WWDC, on or before WWDC. And then when Logic 10.5 came out on a Tuesday, I'm like, well, does that mean... I mean, look, the Final Cut Pro team, we all know them. Do you think they're sitting back going, Logic's at 10.5? Why? It just looks bad. It's a visual... You know, Logic's 10.5 and Final Cut Pro is at 10.4.8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The optics of it.
Two different bodies of users.
I understand.
Some cross-pollination. I know a lot of audio people have wished that there was tighter integration between Logic and Final Cut.
Right.
But if essentially, Logic is not Soundtrack Pro 10. It isn't.
Right. That's correct.
It's primarily a music app. It isn't a sound effects and sound design app primarily, although, of course, people use it for that. So the question is, what are the practical links between them? If you have a feature film or you're doing documentaries, then obviously your music person is going to like the fact that Final Cut links with Logic, but the sound design person, the person doing this actual soundtrack, they may be using Pro Tools, they may not be using Logic, they may be using Reaper or whatever. So those being in lockstep to some extent is not particularly relevant to those people. And as we saw from that feature update, there's no mention of any feature that's relevant to sound designers at all, or anybody who was. You know.
Did that surprise you? I thought that they were going to head at least somewhat in the direction of doing post-production sound for film. They did zero, nothing.
my entire career, it hasn't surprised me, but I came through radio in my early days, and I remember audio for video when I started moving into video was thought of. The engineering types, the professional production types, the people that I worked with in video studios looked at audio very differently. And I think that is a natural evolution of how they think about things. I mean, you would tell them something like, coming from the radio business and audio side, well, what about the preamps and stuff like that? And that wasn't even on their radar. If you got a clean signal into a video camera that could be heard, they were done, and they were ready to move on to the other 10,000 engineering tasks they had to do to get something into the broadcast stream. So, that's not how they thought about audio. But the audio guys, that's exactly how they thought about it. What's the right preamp for this microphone to feed my signal chain for making my record?
Right. No, I understand that, but it seems like Logic very easily could do stuff that post-production needs that everybody goes to Pro Tools for now. Well, it seems like it could.
Yeah, but the thing about the sad thing from our point of view about Logic versus Final Cut versus Pro Tools is that Logic has the mind share of the people who aspire to create music, to create albums. They just go, well, who's the famous producer? What do they use? Well, some use Pro Tools, some use Logic. Logic is this kind of slightly shiny, different thing. It's kind of the Final Cut Pro 7 versus Pro Tools back in 2009, 2010. So it has the mind share. So when we kind of Final Cut users mealy-mouthly say, well, it doesn't matter about the high end, it doesn't matter about aspiration, Apple seem to be supporting people and talking about people who are aspirational for people who use Logic or people who are coming from GarageBand or other apps to eventually use Logic. So it's ironic that right here we have an application that does video editing at least as well as Logic is used to create music, and yet we are told that, well, does aspiration matter? Does it matter that high-end TV people or feature film people use Final Cut Pro? And yet on the other side, Logic is not necessarily being promoted to people as saying, hey, you've got 1 or 2 million YouTube subscribers. Why don't you create your music in Logic? Logic is the thing for you, all you YouTubers. That actually doesn't seem to be the conversation. So there's a bit of a mismatch there. And I think maybe to some extent, how much do the two apps need to be in sync? It's really up to when Final Cut or something else changes the way. Essentially what we're talking about with soundtracks to movies and TV shows and stuff like that is that eventually productions will be clouds of objects being sent to people. And then there'll be information, metadata, that tells how to actually play it back. And say you have an audio file that represents a woodpecker pecking the wood. And then if it's VR and they turn the head, then the idea is that the woodpecker sound actually makes sure it goes with where your head is. Now, with music, you don't want the string instruments to move 90 degrees when you turn your head. You want the music to be in your head, not necessarily in the world. So the future is object-based media and the compositor moving towards to where the person who's watching can experience it, which means I could rotate my computer and everything gets recomposited because they're just objects with lots of transparency and lots of information about how to lay themselves out. So some parts of soundtracks are physical and 360 degrees and also by distance. That's parts of soundtracks, just as parts of video are. But I don't know to what extent Logic actually thinks in those terms when people mix stuff. I think that obviously people are creating sound areas, sound fields, but not necessarily, they don't expect them to turn when people turn their heads. So that's a thing to some extent of the logic of playback. So I don't know. That's why it would be fantastic if there was a Soundtrack Pro 10, because I really liked being able to go over and just do a little bit of work over in Soundtrack Pro 10 because it feels a bit silly doing it in Audition, which sometimes I do.
Right. Well, I guess for me, I have to reset my expectations of what Logic is going to be. I use it for music. I have a recording studio, and I use it for there. I use it for my podcast. I use it for Final Cut Pro Radio. I edit all my audio in it. It's very easy to do. I was expecting it to help, fewer people go to Pro Tools out of Final Cut. But it's not. Apparently, that's not going to happen. Apparently, it's just going to stay with music, and it's not going to try to, help with that. With people going to Pro Tools from Final Cut, I was expecting it was going to, but apparently not.
So many people who want to do this stuff. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, and it's a challenge we saw in the first 5 years of Final Cut Pro 10, they get very recalcitrant. This is how I want to work, and so. You get the software companies, I think, this is all just personal feeling that, are we going to keep our audience and grow it, or are we going to rattle it and try to move the industry further? And look at the blowback that 10 got when it first came back for the first 5 years. It was massive blowback of people going, that's not what I thought I wanted, so I'm going to be angry about it for years. And some of us who didn't get angry and just got interested, here we are 10 years later or 9 years later going, oh my God, I'm so glad I figured this new thing out because I am faster, it's easier, it's a lighter footprint, my laptop can edit every bit as good as my desktop, way more expensive machine. I'm detached, I can do it from home,
Sure.
All these benefits which accrued from that change moment. So what I hear you guys saying is that Logic, like Pro Tools, hasn't really come through that big change moment yet. Will they? I don't know.
I mean, weirdly enough, Pro Tools reminds me of After Effects. Because After Effects was a kind of compositing tool, really. It was trying to simulate compositing tools mid-90s. It was about laying one piece of video on top of the other and adding some masks and maybe adding some Photoshop type effects to it. So it was much more, it wasn't about necessarily so much about resolution independence. It was more about fixing video and doing some clever video pixel animation.
Motion graphics.
But then that's the other thing. Then motion graphics kind of comes along in the late 90s and people start using motion graphics for it. And so After Effects becomes kind of two apps in one. It's essentially a compositing metaphor that also is being forced to do motion graphics.
I think it's the other way around.
Really? So you think it's more a compositor that it's actually motion graphics tool that does compositing? Because certainly motion is a motion graphics tool that has some compositing features, but they're somewhat half-hearted compared with how much motion. Yeah.
The nature of layers lends itself really well to motion graphics, and it even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, PCs and Macs, you had to have a lot of processing power to do compositing, high-end compositing. So motion graphics was a little bit easier to do, and it took a while for After Effects to be able to bring on all the compositing tools that you have now. They didn't have it at first. Things that you can do in a node-based compositor, like, for example, Shake, which has been around since the 90s, just could way outperform. Nodes are more nonlinear than layers are more linear. You look from the top down. So I think it was a stronger motion graphics, and then eventually over time, it added more compositing features. To now, it's ubiquitous with compositing and motion graphics.
But kind of what I'm saying is that the After Effects having those two things is a bit like Pro Tools having two things, namely music making and sound design. To the extent that you think in terms of music as like motion graphics a bit. And I think that I'm only just making this up as I say it, and that actually compositing is a bit more like, it's like sound effects and combining sounds together and sound fields and stuff like that. And amazingly enough, despite having a hilarious user interface in the case of Pro Tools, I did a 3-day course in Pro Tools just so I knew what I could be insulting properly. And recently seeing screenshots from screenshots from Avid showing, oh, look at this wonderful new feature. I think, wow, that's 1994. It looks really
very
great.
Archaic.
It's very great,
And across the arc of that development thing, to me, I think of it like, there's feature advancement, there's feature creep, and there's feature rash. And I think those are the three stages of software going from its early days till it becomes a really truly mature industry standard. And the question is, how do you navigate those three stages? Because everybody wants advancement. We all want our software iterate to do better and better and better. But then you get into feature creep where so many little voices on the outside ask for so many things that it starts getting bloated and over. And then all of a sudden, marketing gets into it and they need some fabulous new thing that it becomes the feature rash that so messes up what the core does that you can't effectively get into it and use it unless you've been a long-time user. And I would imagine that for the software designers and engineers out there, that must be a very difficult thing to balance those competing constituencies and find the right place for their software.
Bill, I think you're talking about Premiere, not Final Cut Pro.
I wasn't talking about any only.
With feature creep, Final Cut Pro doesn't have feature creep. I've
really
never seen
doesn't.
Final Cut Pro 10. Yeah, I've seen Premiere have it. People have been complaining about it. It comes out and things crash, but not the Final Cut Pro team. That's not one of their things that they do.
But why? It's because I think when people on the boards go, I want this and I want this and I'm over here in this subset of the industry and please put that in, they go, we're going to do what we think are the core. We're going to look at with things like the enhanced color thing. Okay, yes, this is more important as we go along. Yes, Rec 2020 we see is coming down the pipe. We need to recode all of our stuff so it's clean, not just for Rec 709, but it can evolve into Rec 2020 in the future. So it's worthwhile to get the engineering team into the color science of this and robustly increase its features.
So we got a comment from Scott. He says, I would rather see Final Cut Pro get more and more audio tools to make a trip out to a DAW unnecessary. Serena, you and I have been talking about audio. You've been doing audio in Final Cut Pro. You've had some success and you've had some issues. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I'm listening to the discussion, and every time we get in a group and we have a discussion about any tool, the point of view differs according to how we're using it. So I'm listening to Alex, I'm listening to Tony, and they're using it in different ways, and they each have their own issues. I think we all know these teams. The Logic Pro team is separate from Final Cut, but I do know those people, and they listen to every comment that comes through. The team reads it. Whether or not they're able to handle it at the moment is another matter. That it may go on to a list for them to handle later on. But I because I'm a predator, I don't like bouncing back and forth between different programs when I'm in a hurry to get something done. And I have actually found the audio tools in Final Cut to be much more robust than I thought in the beginning. You really can go in there and tweak your audio and do a pretty darn good job of it using Final Cut and never leaving Final Cut. Now, I know there are things that are automated in Logic Pro that would probably save me time, and I will start using Logic Pro more. But for the time being, I can change the sound very easily. And for me, for example, on OWC Radio, we were talking about the problem that I had mixed audio because I used Ecamm Live for the interview with Orlando Luna. And then and it also became a problem in terms of sound because I did a pickup with Orlando separately. Okay, so we had the original interview that was me and Orlando, and I was recording it on Ecamm Live, which I wish I hadn't done.
Right.
And so I ended up with mixed audio. The pickup was done using Ecamm regular, so I had separate tracks for us. And then I had another interview with Andy, who is the person that runs Orphan Starfish, who was on one of those god-awful Skype calls with, he didn't have a microphone. So he was using the audio from his computer. Now I'm trying, as somebody producing this podcast, trying to get some decent
balance
audio
everything, sure,
and balance it between all the different sounds that were coming in. And I did the best I could using Final Cut. And I think the output was pretty good considering what came in. I mean, we all say garbage in, garbage out. But sometimes you can wrap the garbage so it doesn't smell so bad.
Sure. So
great metaphor.
But yeah.
Speaking of Orlando Luna, he has always been one of the main presenters down in Washington for Final Cut Pro 10. Every time I went to a presentation, he was there. I'd talk to him.
Yeah.
I'd say, we want a scrolling timeline. He goes, we heard you. That's what he would tell me. We heard you. This is years ago. Maybe it might have been, Yeah, it was 10. But one presentation I'll never forget at the early stages of Final Cut. I don't know if it was 10.0 something or 10.1. He was doing a presentation. He had this stuff set up. Final Cut crashed in front of everybody. And when he came back, everything was lost. I'll never forget that. That was down at, yes.
That's unusual
absolutely.
for Final Cut.
It's happened. Well, put it this way: if Final Cut crashes or quits on you, it doesn't go back to the same timeline that you had. It doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't remember any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the time. So, but in this case, it was in front of a crowd of people. It was at, well, I won't say where it was, but it was a presentation down in the Washington area. But I mean, that's most people didn't know that, but I got a kick out of that he came back and it crashed and he came back and everything he was doing was all gone. He had to redo it from scratch.
In my case,
That's
sitting
really
here in the
unusual.
voice booth, I do tons and tons of narration and spot VO stuff. And basically, I do all of that. I haven't touched a DAW or any other program for doing audio in 8-9 years now. And I find that what exists in Final Cut 10 for tracking, for basically using all the Logic plugins, which are plumbed right into Final Cut 10 for compression and EQ and all the rest of that, and even going into an audio only timeline and doing precision editing, I find it's everything I need to meet the needs. Yeah. Plus, you get that stuff on the outside. I wrote about this a few years ago, and it blew me away. When I was starting to understand more and more about the browser and tagging things, I found that literally the tagging thing, because it is not just frame accurate, but I find it to be pretty precise, I was able to start learning to do things like there's a rhythm to a voiceover, right? It has a rhythm. And I was starting to learn to select ranges for blocks of copy based on trying to put my in point 50% of the way through the rhythmic pulse in or out of that. And I had a circumstance where I was assembling a radio spot, and I had gone through using the keyword tags, and I had made favorites, and I had only one favorite of each of the 6 paragraphs in the 60-second radio spot. And so I just sorted by favorite, sorted by time code, and then appended them to the timeline. And I listened back and I went, well, I'm done. I can send that to the station.
Sure.
But it just blew me away.
There's a reason why people go to Pro Tools, though, out of Final Cut.
Yes.
You know, so I'm just saying, I always expected, I mean, everybody says we can do audio in Final Cut. You absolutely can. You can. But the films and the higher end stuff, everybody goes to Pro Tools. And there's a reason for that.
We send out to Pro Tools all the time to a mixer, to an audio house here, because really it's because their talent. It's the person behind
exactly.
The
that's true.
That can give a higher level of audio and mixing and sound design. Final Cut is definitely capable of doing, and stuff that where we can't send out. I have no problem using it. I wish there was a couple things that you could add to it. That would
cool.
Just
what are those features?
help.
That's interesting.
So like, how you can put effects on tracks. It'd be great if you could put effects on rolls.
Absolutely.
Not a fan of using compound clips for.
I am not either, Tony.
For that
No.
workflow.
Give me a high five. Give me a high five.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And levels on rolls too, right, Tony?
Yes.
Levels on rolls.
Levels on rolls would be great.
What about, like, this is coming from a pure curiosity, so I have no understanding if this is even possible, but you know how we can use motion to create things for Final Cut? I mean, is there anything worth value of doing that from Logic to Final Cut? If we could create roll packs where we could put pre-effects on there and bring them in as a roll.
Something how you can publish out a motion to go into Final Cut's timeline.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Now, speaking of that, one of the most common requests we get, roles-based mixer. Okay, we need that, something or whatever they're going to do with roles-based mixing in Final Cut. But I found out, going back and forth with Chris Hawking the last couple of days about audio and XML in and out of Logic versus Final Cut. Logic, even 10.5, only exports XML 1.5. That's what it exports. So what happens is it strips out a lot of the metadata that people need if you're doing video. It has all the audio information. that you need, but it doesn't have all the video information that strips it out. Logic, XML 1.5, Final Cut's doing 1.8. There is a hint in the Logic notes that said it's going to support 1.9. So that seems like Final Cut Pro 10.5 is going to have 1.9, but Logic will import 1.7 and 1.8, which Final Cut exports, but it exports 1.5. So it's very inefficient, stripping stuff out that shouldn't, it seems like it to me.
Which is even better reason to add more tools to keep your mix inside of Final Cut. Because it's so powerful. You have picture and you have sound. Just like, I feel like just adding a couple more things, it could just really open up.
Tony, look towards Alex. There you go. Alex, what were you going to say?
Now, the idea, I don't do very advanced audio in Final Cut or anywhere, really. I use Audition sometimes to do the thing that I used to do in Soundtrack Pro, which is getting audio print and reducing the noise print and all that kind of stuff. I'm just used to using the Soundtrack Pro style of doing it, which is the Sound Edit 16 style of doing it, or Sound Edit if you want to go back to 1990. And so when I go into Logic, I don't even really have, it doesn't seem to really like messing with the actual numbers of the audio files. It's like, I'll do it if you want, but it doesn't seem to be part of the UI metaphor in practice. So I use Final Cut to do all my work. I just really like the idea of having a modifier key I can hold down when I'm making selections in Final Cut for audio on subframe level to make it so it's on the zero crossing, so that I would not create any clicks at all when I do edits. So that could be really tight. But if I'm holding down whatever, the Z key or something like that, and I'm dragging, it just jumps as I drag or click or whatever to zero crossing moments. That means there will be no clicks on any of the subframe edits that I do.
Zero crossing is a no-brainer to me for audio.
Yeah, so why not? That would be a thing. It knows where all those zero crossings are in the channel that I'm actually on. Now, of course, if there's lots of different tracks and different channels, then there are multiple zero crossings in different places. But I think that would be quite a neat thing to be able to do. So and you could even make it so that was the default, and you have to hold down the key to do the opposite. Because in practice, most picture editors don't really want to have to think about zero crossings and clicks. They just want to be able to have to do it quick and get on with the stuff. So yeah, that was just my feature request for audio in Final Cut beyond the Soundtrack Pro 10, which is kind of actually what I want, really, a sound designing system. It turns out that inside Final Cut since 10, the audio systems, the audio plugins are actually implemented using a bit of XML wrapped around audio units. So you can actually open those things up and see that they're actually XML. So some tool created that XML that actually feeds parameters into audio units. So there should be, there's obviously Apple has the tools for making that XML, but it would be really nice if they actually had an app for creating those things so that we could use them like we use Motion and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's the dual-headed music versus sound design thing that is a slight problem there, and Pro Tools seems to have got away with it, and Logic isn't interested in that particular. But that's
Imagine what would happen if Apple demanded that everybody working in audio change sample rates instead of 48 kilohertz and 44.1 kilohertz. They went to things that were evenly divisible by 30, 29, 97. And the rest of it. Change the audio world to match what we're doing, please.
Well, I mean, nightmares.
If you saw Michael Cioni's thing at NAB last year, he says, what about a standard frame size? 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah. That was just
instead of 16 by 9
geometry, but that all of these things have
no, it's not, but it's not going to happen, of course.
Yeah,
not going to happen. By the way, Tony, I totally agree with you about using Pro Tools and a sound mixer when you're working on a film. My documentary, surely I'm sending it out. But when you're doing something for iHeartRadio or for YouTube, then we can keep it simple and save money, which is always nice. Is anybody here on Catalina yet? I'm on Catalina on my Mac Pro. Bill, you are?
I've been on Catalina.
Can I ask you guys a question? I ran into something.
No, we don't have time for that.
I ran into something the last couple of weeks that was a little distressing. And, I'm the biggest Final Cut fan in the world, but I had done a very extensive sound edit for Jem Schofield and also for Orlando. There were over 77 clips in that last podcast with Orlando. I got everything finished and I went to export it, and OWC has asked me to do an MP3 in addition to the other stuff. And the audio was completely distorted. Not only was it distorted in the output, however, it also corrupted the timeline.
It did?
So the timeline that sounded beautiful when I was working on it, I went to output it, and the output was distorted. Then I went back to the timeline to re-output it, and it was distorted. And I had to close down Final Cut and start, and I took an XML of the current project, took a snapshot of it just in case, and then I brought everything back in again, and I had to start over.
Did you take those outputs that you did and drop them on something like Media Info and see if there was some kind of a setting that was conflicting sample rates? Because most of the time, most of the audio issues that I've ever run into had to do with conflicting sample rates, or the application of a filter that is doing something like trying to normalize, and that gets sent to something else that's trying to normalize, and the next thing you know, you're out of limit and you're crushing waveforms horribly.
Serena, let's blame Bill. It's Bill's fault.
Okay, Bill, it's your fault.
Yeah.
When I output the M4V, it worked fine, or a WAV file worked fine, or the MOV file worked fine. The MP3 was distorting it, and it didn't. I had to pull Jem's interview off, out of distribution, and then redo it and put it back up again. So I just was wondering if anybody, if that's
export an
Catalina
AIFF and try doing the MP3 transcode in some other tool. There's plenty of audio
I used QuickTime. I just went into QuickTime and output it, and then it was fine. But I would,
file is a bug report, because there may be something that Apple's engineers aren't aware of in that particular workflow, and that's why those bug reports are hugely important. They will never fix things they don't know about.
It's just a very strange anomaly. It doesn't do that on the MacBook Pro or the iMac, but on the Mac Pro with Catalina, it does it.
10 under Catalina all the time. There are two or three things, particularly not broadcast. Most of the time, the MP3s are for viewing at home by executives who don't have a lot of sophistication about being able to transcode things. So I get that request a good little bit. I was kind of surprised. I've been delivering broadcast video for a little while during this whole shutdown thing, and I'm surprised at how many of the services want 24-frame video as a specification. It's like
that's what I shoot in.
Yeah, but it's I've never seen that, right? So I've been in broadcast or around broadcast.
24 and 2398.
Yeah, 2398 for most of the TV broadcast standard pages that I'm getting now are requesting MXF wrapped 2398 frame rate.
Well,
I'm surprised at that.
That started happening a few years ago when 24 was the thing, and then now everybody's using it because they know it's not really the thing anymore. I mean, I've always questioned 24.
Owned and operated, like the NBC O&O in our market was requesting those kind of, and so that surprised me.
I found that too for the local regional markets, 2398, but when we upload to networks and stuff, it's still 2997.
Yeah, but it's just surprising to me. I was surprised to see that request. I will also say this is a hint for everybody who's watching Richard's show. During the very first week of this whole COVID thing, we had a crash delivery of some content. They were trying to raise money for food banks in the local San Diego area, so they wanted this on the air real fast because they knew this was the folks that I was working for. It was one of the local big credit unions. And so I knew it was going to take me a day to do all the transcodes for like 9 stations in the buy. So I said, look, I'm going to throw this on my Vimeo Pro account as a full res QuickTime. I can't remember 422 or 444. See if your people can get it down. And it took about a day, and they all freaked out and said no. And then they suddenly all did it. And we were on 7 stations, and it looked great. And I thought, oh my God, if I can get away from never having to do 7 bespoke transcodes, if I can just throw it up on one account and they get to figure with it.
Most of the time it's because somebody just hands them a paper. Like somebody hands Master Control a paper that they got from marketing, which they got from engineering, which they got from marketing, and it just keeps getting handed down. And so there's like, I don't know, here you go.
Yeah.
Usually 80%, 90% of the time, you just give them a ProRes file and they're good.
They're good.
Every once in a while, somebody knows what they're doing and they're like, no, I need it in this format and this ratio. But yeah.
Well, it turns out that things may change a little bit in the US in future, possibly because in 2014, 2015 in the UK, a reasonable amount of the industry, the UK TV industry, is moving over to file-based delivery. But still, in 2016, some TV stations were getting D1 tapes. So they were getting tapes of digital productions being couriered over to them from production companies. And at the end of 2015, they said, okay, this is really stupid. So let's actually specify file-based delivery is that we will not accept any more TV shows at all on the major TV stations. And that's nearly 90% of them, or mainly 95% of them, unless they're actually delivered as files. Which meant that, luckily, they specified all the other aspects of the files, including what were then clocks and what codecs were allowed and all that kind of stuff. And that happened on the 1st of October 2016. And then this thing, which is the DPP standard, which got into Final Cut partially because of all that MXF stuff from that Hamburg. All that kind of stuff is following on from professional delivery. And now it's going around the world. So in Canada and Australia, and first, obviously, the former colonies of the UK, and now Europe, but also they're now the American ESMWA or whatever they're called, are trying to get this file delivery standard. And that includes in HD and 4K and all the actual specifications of what should be on all the channels and stuff like that. And they're coming up with a standard that people actually like, that they're actually being relatively consistent for. So it may not be the one where you can press the button instantly in Final Cut, but pretty close to it, because it's essentially following on from this work that was done, weirdly enough, in the UK. And it's quite popular.
Alex, you're bringing back very bad memories of 2014, 2015, when I was producing for, I'll say a major network. And I suggested to them, because we were delivering on Beta SP, if you can believe it. They wanted it on Beta SP. And I said, could we please have a file-based structure? They said, no, our library wants Beta SP. That's what we're delivering on to the distributor. And I said, let's at least have a .mov file, right? The highest res we can get, so that you have it for permanent retention in your library. No, we're never going to need it. I made them anyway. And I actually got a call thanking me because they found it, because they were going to reprise something, and now they had the digital file. It was crazy, but that's what, you as an innovator run into that all the time, because you're suggesting something that a producer isn't knowledgeable enough to know is coming down the pipeline, and that's the problem. And that's what happened with 24p. In Hollywood, back in the day, everybody was told that 24p was more cinematic, and that's how we needed to be shooting our movies. And so that became the catchphrase, and it's taken years for that to start not being used as much, because people are realizing you don't always need that, right? So anyway, that's my bad memory. Thank you for that. I'm going to go have another cup of coffee.
Now we get please deliver in 60p.
Yeah.
But that's the delivery part into the station, into the broadcasters. Remember broadcasters? Yeah, those guys, they're still around for now. But then you actually have the people who go, well, what about if we're making a movie? What about all the different masters that we need to do around the world for different airlines, different airline standards, all that kind of stuff? So this is why IMF is really cool. As well as standing for the Impossible Missions Force, of course, it also stands for Interoperable Mastering Format, which means that instead of having to produce 700 different versions of your new feature film, you produce an interoperable mastering format version of it, and then you leave that with a company. And then you specify to them, well, I need the Albanian airline cut in these languages with these subtitles burnt in and this kind of stuff. And the actual file can be, all the switches can be set, and the thing can be output as a digital file and can be sent to their cable company or their satellite company in a different part of the world.
And so please output it as wide, square, and tall for me.
But it still has to be delivered as a different format, though, right? As a sub master.
Well, the thing is that this kind of cloud of data, this little database about how to make this movie and all its possible variations, is in one file. There's only one copy of the timeline apart from its little variations. If you have slight variations of the timeline or little overlays that you want to put in there to cut in, like remember DVDs used to do, you've got those little variations timeline. So they'll actually have a different piece of media in the database. And that will be included in that master for maybe the censored cut because that locality needed censoring and that thing, and a different censoring version on the airline version, all that kind of stuff. Maybe drinks are not allowed in certain parts of Middle East, for instance, or something like that. But they actually shoot something that's different, or they cut around it in such a way that it's different. And this big massive thing, this database of how to master the movie, and then it produces another master for those guys. So it's not like Albania will be able to produce the Disney Plus version that goes on shows on airlines because they have the whole database. They just have the output from that database. In that case,
based on metadata, they can get a new censored master if they need to.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a kind of, and I think
that's cool.
It seems that Final Cut seems to be the ultimate NLE for working with these kind of databases, because instead of thinking in terms of tracks, you're thinking in terms of the logical use of these things, which auditions and roles and all the things that we are used to lead into that future, almost like it's 21st century media, in which it's not just a monolithic timeline, because we don't have monolithic timelines going into them, and they're not the things that are being broadcast. So maybe you just need a tool that can deal with these things and actually think in those terms. Because
there's a higher level thing, though. The little hair on the back of my neck is starting to raise, because all of a sudden we get into versioning, which means that somebody's going to say, as you're saying, we're going to take this scene out of that because it's not good for that market. And then you're in this horrible conflict of intellectual property. At what point does the altered movie not become the movie it originally was? I mean, if you're snipping scenes and you're
that happens now, though.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
That's why we're doing it at the studio level.
I'm asking everybody to think about what is intellectual property in this era where you can recut and remove scenes, because we're seeing people do that on YouTube all the time, right? They're lifting things out of commercial things, they're putting their mashup together, and they're putting it out there. Everybody loves the creativity and the rest of that. But I did come across a thing, and I think I've told this story online before, decades ago, where a friend in a small video group, this was probably 25, 30 years ago when we were just fiddling around, had done a piece where he took a wonderful piece of artistic content. It was Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World, which is beloved the world across.
It's a great song.
It is fabulous. Great. And for his creative thing, he wanted to do something about the Holocaust, so he matched that with pictures of people killed in the Holocaust.
That doesn't make... Yeah.
So for a year, I could not listen to that song without seeing these horrible images.
Right.
So
I don't know. Yeah.
This is the problem. At one level, you're saying, reframe, redo, take this out, take that chunk out for that market, sanitize it for them, put in the extra XR rated cut over here for these people. But then the nature of the work of art gets altered every time.
There's two different.
Yeah, these are two different discussions. Yeah, we're talking about from the distributor point of view.
But the Venn diagram of it overlaps, and I just say that people need to think about this. When you're cutting work that's yours, carte blanche, go for it. But people are not. They're cutting work that is other people's work, and they are injecting that into their streams. And this, I think, is a bit of a slippery slope.
Well, that's copyright infringement. But on the distribution side, when I direct, write, or produce something for a network, I have to give them an additional what they call an international scene, because the clock is different in different countries. So I have to shoot a scene specifically for international distribution if I'm working for a domestic network. And I think that's the other reason why, for example, if HBO has to do over 100 different versions, literally, of their original master, they're going to distribute it from their studio just to make sure that it's exactly the way they want it, that it adheres to their standards and practices, and that there aren't any glitches in any of the media. So, and they also at that point then retain the copyright, no question, because it's originated from their studio.
It's coming from the top down, and it's
exactly
they're paying for it to be distributed. So
exactly.
Versus somebody just on a completely different level grabbing something randomly and just using it for what they want. That's piracy.
But as we saw with DV cameras, it's funny because the stuff on the bottom eventually moves to the middle, and sometimes those people become the people working at the top. And so I think we're going to move into an era of additional conflicts because of these kind of topics. So for everybody watching, just think about them. You don't have to change your behavior right now, but think about them. Think about what it means when you pull something off the web and change it for your own purposes and send it back out on the web. Are you as okay with doing that at somebody else's work as you would be if somebody did that to your work?
100%.
Well, that's the that's the Creative Commons choice, right? That's you choose what license you want to do. You can get a model shoot. I could, of course, naturally, I'm a photo model, and everyone wants to take pictures of me. But
you're hired.
Exactly. But would I want to have the moral component of would I want my photograph to be characterized as somebody who was a child killer, or something like that? And they just showed a picture of me, and they said child killer, and it was just the same. In practice, I have to make that choice in terms of what I'm prepared to license out as my rights. I get more money if they can use my photo for any reason to say anything, if you see what I mean. So it's up to the originators to make that choice, but also separately, maybe in a few years' time, when everything is clouds of media and everything can be remixed and remodeled and overridden, then maybe the originators will automatically get paid because the payment rights may be included in the actual media. So they may have for example, what happens on YouTube at the moment is if you've got a long conference and you play a TV commercial in the middle, YouTube will give you the option of we can snip that commercial out for you automatically, and you don't have to even worry about it because somebody else owns the rights. So they're actually doing that for you. Or what happens is that you can't get commercials on that video if it's primarily made of that piece of music. Then the people who made the music get the money, and any adverts associated with it. So maybe rights will be, through media fingerprinting, follow these kind of mashups and stuff like that.
Which means it's hugely important to understand what Alex just said. Alex is talking about what's attached metadata to the files we are working with. And in my learning Final Cut Pro 10, I had a thing happen. It must have been 6 years ago. I was working with some photographers, helping them learn video skills. And one of them, in telling me how to set up my then new, so it must have been probably 7 years ago, 5D Mark II, showed me where I could put my name in the camera. And I did that, and I completely forgot about it. And then 2 years later, I looked on a project that I had shot on YouTube, and I thought, I want to see about metadata, so I pulled it down, and there was my name on the photographer line of the metadata sitting in that. So think about how many things that means. You're going to rent a camera. You're going to shoot your big project. And the metadata for camera owner, which is going to be maybe who owns the copyright at some point, if it gets into a court somewhere, is going to be the camera rental house. Wait a second, does that mean I have to stop whenever I get a camera from somebody and I have to change that ID? And boy, you better believe I better think about changing it back away from me if I rent a camera, put my information tags in there, and then who knows what the next person is going to rent that camera and use it for. And I sure the heck, there's all sorts of kinds of content I don't want to be metadata attached to. So it's getting your head around this whole new environment of sidecar files following original content.
We're going to start calling you Metadata Bill.
Well, no, this is not me. This is Phil Hodgetts. He and I had conversations back when we first met 15, 20 years ago at NAB, and I started realizing that Phil understood this stuff, and he was bringing me along to understand the incredible power of this unseen layer of what happens in the files that we create with our cameras.
Sure.
And so,
we've all had our work we've discovered our work in other places where it's not supposed to be. I've had people use my still photography without permission. I had a network use some of my video without my permission when I had specifically negotiated with them for a certain price for them to use my clips. And then they went and they got it from, I got a copy from a funeral video that had incorporated clips of the person they were doing their story about. And they used those clips in the network story. So the whole issue of copyright and fair use has really shifted in the last 10 years. The new generation feels like everything should be for free. They have a cultural mindset that says that, oh, well, there's so many people creating content. We're all sharing it. We shouldn't have to pay for it. We shouldn't have to ask for permission. And I think, Bill, you're absolutely right. I think we need to educate them about copyright ownership and the original content creator having rights in their material and having a say in how that's
demo.
used.
And after the demo was done, somebody went up and was talking to the demo guy, and he showed some content, and they happened to put it on the big screen, and it was stuff that I had shot. And he was saying that it was stuff that he had created. And I just remember sitting there going, oh, my God, I had worked a little bit with him, and I sent him that, and we were doing some stuff. And the next thing you know, this is like, on your reel, is it your work? Is it somebody else's work? How do you align for that? And for the young people who might be watching this, I will tell you, this is a dangerous thing, because if you purport in your reels and in your stuff that you can do work of this level, and you get a gig because of that, and you can't do work of that level, this is not going to go well. You are going to move from being somebody they're excited to work with to being somebody that they don't trust, because you don't have the skills to do this. So on your reels, it's okay to use work that you've worked on, but if you were the focus puller, just put that on, that you are not the cinematographer, you were the focus puller. You were, the PA. That's great. If they're looking for a PA and you've worked on a big project, that's going to benefit you. But just, man, honestly, has never been more important about credentials and about building your reputation, because honestly, in this business, everybody here will raise their hand if I say your reputation is the single most important thing, not your camera, not your gear, it's your reputation. Hands down.
Coffee is the most important thing.
Well, okay,
after Pete's coffee.
Serena, don't tell Bill he's absolutely correct. Say you're about 80% correct.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I don't
his
want to
ego is already big enough. I don't want him going on the Creative Cow forums and just blowing everybody away.
It's just some things. These are the things that we had to learn coming up, and this isn't in the film schools. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is. It probably is in the better film
nowadays,
schools.
Maybe.
Yeah, but in this era, we're all learning through these random things that we watch online, and so people have to talk about this stuff. It's critically important.
Can we talk for a minute about kids doing master classes on subjects that they barely know themselves and charging for them? That's another subject. That's my current pet peeve.
Yeah, I've seen that myself. Tony, something happened to your audio.
It sounds like a different mic has taken over. It's further away.
Me?
Maybe Tony.
Tony.
Yeah.
Number one. Tony's number one. That's what he said.
I'm going to have to run in a minute, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm on deadline.
Same here.
Well, this is much more important, Serena. Your deadline can wait.
It's very important. You are very important. You are all my friends, and you are very important. And I have to say, in this time of COVID, despite the fact that we can't see each other in person, I've had more contact with people than I have in a long time on a more regular basis. And from that standpoint, it warms the heart to know that there's so many people in our family that care about each other. I love that.
This is my fourth live stream this week.
Yeah, Richard's been on consistently, and it's great knitting these disparate groups together so that everybody gets a chance to. It also just means that we're stuck. We can't do the regular stuff, so learn.
Well, it's fun, though. It's fun talking to all you guys.
It is.
It is.
I really enjoy it.
Yeah. I think it's important that we keep reaching out, even if it's just one-to-one, it's not on a live stream. Sometimes like Ryan Wilburn and I will get on and just FaceTime and just kind of catch up. I think that's really important.
I have one other question for you guys before we go, if we have time, or maybe this is another segment, Richard. So many people are using Zoom. Corporations are using Zoom with hundreds of people on. And we all know there's major security problems with Zoom right now. How are they even allowing that to happen? Why are they? I don't understand how that is happening. Because your information, when you're on a Zoom call, you are open to hackers. You, me,
so,
all of
as
us.
I understand it from reading
Seriously.
online, Zoom went from 2 million users to 200 million users in the space of like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't even conceptualize trying to do
So here's
that.
the thing about Zoom. I don't know about version 5, which just came out. NASA has banned them. Elon Musk has banned them at SpaceX. There's a lot of the Senate has banned their use. There's school systems that have banned their use. Now, I'm not saying that it's still that way, but it was that way. They had a fake pop-up in Mac OS, a fake pop-up screen to get you to click that was not an official Mac pop-up. Those are the kind of things that I don't like about Zoom. It's not that, yes, the internet is risky. And I got the biggest kick out of this. Google said you can't use Zoom. Of all people, Google said you can't use Zoom in the company computer. So
It's interesting. I mean, Alex and I have popped into Alex Lindsay's office hours. We've been dinging in there, and those are some of the best engineering types that I've seen, and they know this stuff quite well. And it's where this is my survey of the landscape of having been involved in maybe 10 or 12 of those high-level group chats. There are a lot of services who are trying to carve out this space, because this is exponential growth of an industry. The peer-to-peer video conferencing industry is on fire, and nobody knows how to put out all the fires exactly, and everybody's trying it. And you've got, I know off the top of my head, maybe 7 or 8 competing services, large and small, that are trying to establish a solid position, if not a dominant position. Zoom, I think it's fair to say, is a bit out front of them all. And as the leader in terms of pure number of people using their service, they're running faster than anybody else trying to keep up with what this means to them.
Alex, what do you think about the security issue of Zoom? Are you familiar with the issues raised?
Well, I remember in I think it was September, October last year, they were having found that they'd put their own separate web server inside each copy of Zoom.
Right.
Which meant that they this is in theory makes for better onboarding, which means they didn't have to worry too much about. They knew that means they could send exactly what they needed to things like Safari and to Chrome and to whatever app was running, and they could actually make it work more efficiently. That's the perfectly fine principle. It's more that they weren't very good at the security aspects of other people being able to get into that web server and messing with it and then recording everything else that you do in your browser.
Right.
So that was the thing when I first heard of them, and then I said, and I thought, I think one of my customers or somebody associated with me asked me to download this Zoom thing a few months ago, and so I immediately just deleted it off my Mac back then. But the thing about Zoom version 5 is that in theory, they won't allow people to even use versions earlier than version 5 after the end of this month. So from the 1st of June or something like that, the security inherently will be better. Not perfect, but better. The catch is they're all going in different directions at once. They're having to establish servers all over the world. They've got lots of researchers in China, and that's where lots of their research is actually done, and where they actually created all this technology in order to distribute these things. It's a matter of working out, of the 200 million people, would they have access to what I email and my passwords and stuff like that? Maybe, probably not. The thing about it, sadly, is it's a bit like we have to be those two guys or gals who meet a bear in the woods. We just have to make sure that we get away faster from that bear than the other person does. We both don't have to get away.
Right.
Essentially, that's the difference. We have to have slightly less bad security than the other people, and then those other people are the ones that the people are going to go after. So it's a matter of, sadly, to what extent Zoom is reducing our security, but other things that we do to make up for that will actually make up for it. The catch is, the onboarding side is so easy, and with this new standard of being able to send somebody a link and then your browser does it all in practice is just appealing. And it's a matter of, I kind of think, it's really nice for Skype to say, you screwed it up, you lost it, and you deserve it because you just thought that you had all the power and all the control and everybody had to use you. But we still have to do that silly thing of having to be online on some app at the same time, both connected together. It's quaint as the 20th century way of doing stuff, if it feels like, in the case of Skype. So
to piggyback on your bear metaphor, though, the main problem is that the forest lit on fire. And we all had to run into the forest for safety. We all had to go from our regular business lives to telecommuting from home. And so none of us knew how to handle the fact that bears live in this world. And we all have to figure it out in real time. And so that kind of disruption, very difficult, very challenging, but also I remember somebody telling me, it's the old Chinese fake proverb. I don't know if it's fake or true, but may you live in interesting times. It's stressful, it's messy, but it's also opportunity because things will break down and reform. And so now people have a chance to position themselves for the Reformation and to make leaps ahead of where you would have been if you hadn't done that, if the old system hadn't collapsed.
So establishing that new 27 frames per second video standard.
Not going to happen now.
That's all we need.
Serena, this can be summed up as being chased by a bear in a forest that's on fire.
Yeah, there you go. But you know what? That bear caught me a few years ago, so I'm very leery of this. Anyway.
But we're all in our fireproof cocoons in our homes, so we're okay. Yeah, you're not in immediate danger. But
hey,
boy, that world out there is changing.
I got to go put my praying mantis cocoons in the trees around the property. So
to protect from the killer bees.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard that sentence in my entire life.
I have praying mantis babies in little cocoons that I'm planting.
Wow. Nice.
Yes, there is life outside of Final Cut and Logic Pro. There is life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. I gotta run.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye, Serena.
Talk to you later, Serena. Talk to you offline.
Okay.
Now I got to rearrange everybody's lower third. No, I'll take them off. There we go. There we go. There we go.
You mean they're not dynamic lower thirds, Richard?
Not yet. Not yet. They don't stick to the frame. I have to do them manually right now. But it's not too bad. I set up double scenes, one without, so I switched to the one without, and everything's fine. It can switch all at once. Tony, are you looking forward to Final Cut Pro 10.5?
Of course, absolutely. I can't wait to see what they put in there, what they change, what they fix or tweak. We can all speculate. We all have these ideas in our head. What's important for us? I'm just looking forward to seeing. Can they push it forward? Can they open it up so we can do more with it?
Sure.
I'm pretty sure they will.
It's the Final Cut Pro team. It's not Premiere. I keep saying that.
Yeah.
It's the Final Cut Pro team.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's interesting. The question is, if you look at what Logic, the team, decide to add to Logic, maybe that comes from their insights into the music production industry. It could be that the Final Cut Pro team also have to bear in mind what the rest of Apple wants. And it's the Logic team don't have to say, we have to make sure that Logic is very fast using the replacement for stuff to do with metal and multiprocessing and ARM chips and all that kind of stuff. It's almost like Logic are there being a professional app, but they don't have to dance to the music of Apple's various marketing needs for their operating system, for their high-end Macs, because Logic by definition will market those things, and they don't actually have to do anything particularly different to Logic in order to make it so that it'll promote the new Mac Pro and work in Catalina. But maybe it's possible that the Final Cut Pro team are pulled in different directions. So Final Cut Pro 10.5, I think it's one of the few opportunities Apple actually communicates with us to what they think matters. And we'll see what they think matters. And that's all of Apple, not necessarily the people who actually have to make the software. And then we'll just have to see what they're communicating with us. And that's just a little bit more information. That's what we'll get out of Final Cut Pro 10.5, is more information about what they think Final Cut Pro should be. And then we have to just assess it and then work out try and guess more stuff in the future. I mean, I wish it was like Safari. Final Cut Pro 10.5, I wish it was like Safari, to the extent they'll say Final Cut Pro 10.5 and also the Final Cut Pro 10.5X beta program, available for people who want to risk it to download for free on this website, all that kind of stuff like they do for Safari, because we want to test future technologies and we want people who are integrating with Final Cut Pro, i.e. like people who are integrating with Safari, to be able to create future websites and future technologies associated with Safari/Final Cut Pro. That's actually would be an amazing thing. And then Final Cut Pro would be a thing that's to do with the operating system. It will be mentioned at WWDC, and it will be about creating big ecosystems for thousands of developers instead of, we have a big ecosystem, but instead of hundreds or tens of developers, if there was a session at WWDC or 2 days after its 9th birthday in which they said, hey, here's the wonderful new collaborative media operating system based around Final Cut Pro, and we're going to explain it all to you, and you may ask yourself why you as a developer should be caring about this. Here's why you should be caring about the future of Final Cut Pro as developers, for these reasons, because it's going to be part of macOS, iOS, iPadOS, and here's why we want you to be caring about it, and here's what's going to be announced, and here's what's coming later in the year. And they actually treat it like iOS and macOS and iPadOS and Safari, and they actually communicate the way that Apple communicates about other things that Apple do.
Right.
But they don't seem to do about that with Final Cut Pro.
Well, they do once in a while. Once in a while, they'll tell us, like when the Mac Pro came out at WWDC, they said there's going to be a version of Final Cut coming out in the fall that's more optimized for the Mac Pro. So they can, if they want to, they can make a pre-announcement. They've pre-announced Final Cut a couple of times. But here's one thing I'm certain of. You see if you guys agree. Everybody, 100% of the people are going to be completely satisfied with 10.5. No complaints on the web.
Of course.
Bill, you're laughing. You're the one that's going to be complaining the most, right?
Not one troll.
The only thing I know about the human condition is that if there's something potential to complain about, someone somewhere, and usually large numbers of people there, will find a way to complain about it. So,
not everybody's version of paradise is paradise.
That's right.
That's right.
Amen.
The funny thing is, it doesn't actually matter what features they come with Final Cut Pro 10.5. If everybody has all the features that everybody wants, it won't change to the extent that professional people in post-production trust Apple. It doesn't make any difference what features it has. The last 9 years have proved that. It's actually the rest of what Apple is allowed to do to show that it cares for the high-end and professionals, and to do the things that Avid do and the things that Adobe do. It doesn't. That has been a
surprise to me all along, is that the capacity of high-performing, high-level, smart, successful people to get butthurt about some change in their tool and carry a grudge on it for 5 years. Yeah. I mean, it astonishes me.
I think in this case, it's not necessarily that people it's not the specifics of Final Cut Pro 10 itself. It's more the fact that they don't think Apple are going to pull the rug out from under their feet again, if they trust them again. And adding new features to Final Cut Pro doesn't make Apple more trustworthy. All it means is that Apple are adding new features to Final Cut Pro. It doesn't mean suddenly, I think I'll bet my business on supporting Final Cut Pro. I'll bet my business on creating workflows for TV shows, reality TV shows, and TV network stations, because it doesn't matter the features. If you think that Apple don't seem to be acting like they care about people making money out of this stuff, if Apple act like they say, just go to an Apple store to get your Mac, you don't get margins from selling Macs to your TV station. You don't get margins for that. Tell them to go to a store. What about support? Tell them to go to the web, or go to the forums that are organized by other people, or the wonderful, go to Creative Cat. Here's all the places they should go. So how are people supposed to make money out of betting their business on recommending Final Cut Pro and Macs? I just...
it's
the
still,
idea,
to me, though, astonishing.
It's not the features of the software that matter. It's the fact that Apple aren't trustworthy from their point of view, for the people who will recommend Final Cut Pro to other people.
But that's a behavioral thing, and it still astonishes me. I understand it, and I agree with you. This is what it is. But it's not people assessing whether or not the math works. It's people assessing whether or not you told me about the math early enough so I can feel special.
Yeah.
That's what people were upset about at the 10 launch. We didn't know anything about this. We were in, I'm now learning the same thing that my 15-year-old neighbor across, and I'm a professional, and this offends me, and you can't do this to me. And you spent thousands on your hardware and software over the course of the time, and you said at this moment in time, everybody is reset to square one. And people don't like that, and they carry that grudge for a long time.
But the problem is that the consultants who had the rug pulled out from under their feet in 2011, 2012, those are the people who are now specifying the technology that should be used on Netflix shows. Those are the people
totally agree with you.
Those are the people who were mid-level. They've kind of licked their wounds and got on with it, and actually work with stuff they don't particularly like working with anymore. And they've just got on with it. It's now working for them, and they're now using, MXF and Avid and Premiere and whatever. And now they're the bosses, and they're saying, "Hey, I hear Final Cut's really good, but I don't trust Apple."
I know.
They haven't done anything. They haven't done anything for me to trust them at all.
I agree with you, but also if you think about back in the day when you had to put an Avid system together, right? You needed support. It was almost mandated that you had to have an engineer support team from that company to help you navigate. Like, I just put these boards in there, these DNX boards, and I'm connecting the storage, and it's not working because this driver and that. You needed that, and you needed it on a yearly license. But I mean, if you look at how, like, I used to install all that stuff, and it would take me 2 or 3 days to install all the different, After Effects and Photoshop, Final Cut 7, because I had to wipe my computer clean. I had to make sure I updated it, and I had to do everything in stages for each computer to make sure that it all worked properly. That's kind of gone now, right? You have a laptop and you put Final Cut on there, and it works. I mean, it's not the same for Adobe and whatnot, but for the most part, it's just cloud download and your system works. Yes, there is the font that can screw everything up, or something like that, but things are much easier. Things are much quicker to download.
I think the thing they're missing is that while they were playing that game of make me feel better and make me feel like because we're still playing this big game, that was the seam that the new YouTubers and the iJustines of the world slipped into. I can buy this thing. I can build an audience. I can do these things that all you broadcast people are telling me I shouldn't be able to do because I don't have all this institutional knowledge. And they just said, the heck with that, I'll build an audience over here. And now they have millions of people and are making more than all four of us combined by a factor of 10 to 1, because they didn't get tied up when things were changing. They saw opportunity in the chaos of not developing smart enough and fast enough, and they slipped in and had a great impact on their life because of it. And I just think we're back in another one of those inflection points. Who's going to be able to slip in to this new world and do what and be ready for whatever this is going to change into?
Well, I think you hit on the nail with adaptability. Adaptability is crucial to evaluate yourself and your market. Say, okay, am I adaptable enough to change this about me or change this about how I do things?
Right. And even if it doesn't work perfectly, even if the company doesn't do everything you want, even if Blackmagic does not let me cut Blackmagic Raw inside Final Cut for a while because of whatever is whatever is swirling in the back rooms of those companies, you still have a chance to change your workflows and get ready. And if it happens, it will accelerate you. If not, you may change cameras or change NLEs, or you'll do something. But the people who are going to get ahead in the race are the people who are not letting that stop them.
But I'm just really, the fact that every day somebody's starting to learn Premiere, and they're just letting it fog up their mind. And there's lots of teachers out there at media places, universities, colleges, wherever, and they aren't being given the feeling from Apple that Apple cares about them feeding into the future of media with Final Cut. they're not, Apple EDU Twitter account has mentioned Final Cut Pro twice in the last 4 years.
I agree
As
with
the
you
Apple
100%.
EDU.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are they doing? And obviously we know of Tim David, and he's a fantastic guy, and he does stuff with Apple Education and video. That's fantastic. But if the wider Apple, you are somebody who's a film lecturer, and you say they're going to teach documentary work or create a documentary. They have hardly any sign from Apple that they care. So it's Apple's fault that all these people are wasting their time, that all these people going to have to unlearn all this stuff. Now, inflection points are great, but it's such a pity that that weeks and months and if 500,000 people are spending all this time, 10 million people are spending all this time learning stuff that is a 20th century way of thinking, in which the compositor essentially is where the editor is, and there's going to be a monolithic piece of media going out there. Thinking in the old way, because essentially that's the model that's built into the core of these bits of software, because that's what tracks are. It's Apple's fault. And it's just it's not like the people who work on Final Cut Pro don't know it's Apple's fault either, because it's not their fault. It's Apple's fault.
Alex,
those are different people.
Alex, you're going to get a very special version of Final Cut Pro 10.5, I have a feeling. They're watching right now, and they're going to have a very special version for you
Get
when
your
you
name all over
download it. Yeah.
But there was
I
a
agree with
cadre
you.
of people who used slide rules really well before slide rules were unimportant, and they had a hard time swapping over. Right, there were just those weird geeks that were carrying around the early TI calculators and doing it that way, and everybody else. And so, abacus to slide rules to calculators to computers in your hand that have access to math libraries that are unfathomably complex. It's, all the individual can do is decide, where do you want to come in? Do you want to go train yourself in what's there, or maybe try to figure out what's going to be there? And people kind of self-select into those pods. I mean, I saw, if I have any remembrance of those early years of Final Cut 10, when I was on the boards going, you're missing the point. There's something here. There's something intelligent about this design. If you pay attention to it, you will start smiling more and finding it easier to do things. And everybody potted off into two groups of people: those who just would not listen, and those who would eventually say, okay, I've been hearing this for such a long time, let me look at it. And it was longer and harder than I think the product deserved, but that's how it went. It's self-selection. If you are open to change, you can change. It's not impossible.
Absolutely. But I think Alex is right in that it'd be nice if Apple did not necessarily have to offer a full education program, but just show the support for it, or maybe show some sort of support or a structure for it, just to give an opportunity for someone to make selections, especially in the education space. That would be good. I mean, it's not, I think they used to do that in other companies.
Well, Alex does one of the best things. Alex will ping on his feeds not only patent office information, but some of the hiring decisions that come on the public-facing Apple boards of who they're looking for. And it's been notable over the course of the past year. I've watched those with great interest and saying, oh, so they're doing some hiring in the video engineering side. Oh, they're doing some hiring in the software side. We all know, and he's out there in public now, that the former product manager, Steve Bays, is no longer there. And there's a new product manager in place now. So he has, he's new to a job for a while, then he's been there for a year, then assumption is he'll be there for 5 years. And I know all of us in our careers, you're not looking at the world the same way in year and month one that you are later on. So where are these things going? What will they bear fruit to be in the next 3 or 4 years? No one knows that, but it's interesting to watch.
Well, so I suppose in the case of Final Cut Pro 10.5, we'll find out to what extent different parts of Apple are, what their arguments are about what Final Cut Pro is, what matters to Final Cut as a useful thing for Apple, and what features are useful for editors of all kinds, from people learning editing for the first time to people who need to make the most complex productions ever. And the time they're actually really communicating is when the new release comes out, because all the other stuff is essentially just kind of marketing, kind of weak source kind of, it's not like they don't really have voices. They don't have people out there. They don't name specific people. It's not the Apple's position to do that. So the only communication is with releases. So we'll see. That's what I'm looking forward to in Final Cut Pro 10.5. I hope, maybe no new features, but a different attitude towards promoting, showing that they care. I mean, imagine that. That's my favorite feature. No new features, just a different attitude.
It would be really nice if BROS could be supported in Final Cut.
Yeah, I keep hearing the different reasons. Some people say it's Apple. Some people say, it's whatever, Black Magic. I don't know what's going on, but I certainly like to see it get in there. I don't shoot with it, but for you guys that do, I just want to get it in there for you.
If we could get an audience of 1 million video editors and ask everybody who would like that to raise their hand, it would be a forest of hands as far as the eye can see, and everybody understands
Black Magic cameras are very, very popular. So I don't see why they, political stuff aside, internal between Black Magic and Apple, it's just do it, Apple. If you're the holdup, do it. If Black Magic's the holdup for some reason, there's some kind of a quid pro quo between Apple and Black Magic that they're not, negotiating effectively, just do it. Just do it.
The problem is you can't put political aside, as we're finding out in life and everything else.
So one of the things that I was shocked when Tim Cook mentioned Final Cut Pro and Logic during the Apple earnings call.
Yes.
Okay? And here's the biggest shock. Pleasantly, I was very surprised that Tim Cook knew what Final Cut Pro was. And Logic, on top of that, I was very pleasant. I was saying, oh, good, Tim knows what it is. At least he can read the teleprompter.
Yeah, he just read it.
Well, that's true. Because I always made the joke that, I'm not sure if he knows what it is. But so we had a comment, Alex, about you. Let me see what it says. Tangier Clark says, I want to make plugins with Alex.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know. It's about time I contributed to the many more motion stuff that seems to be coming out in the last few weeks. I'm one of the moderators of the Motion Facebook group. So if you can stand to use Facebook, then check out our Motion group. It's very, very friendly, and people ask questions, and lots of people answer different ways, and they're great people there. So I should be maybe doing the thing where you record as you make a plugin, as you do stuff, and you just kind of explore what you're doing. I think those are really powerful because it shows that you're not necessarily a super master at everything. You're just sharing your way of thinking as you kind of stumble towards your answer, but you have lots of insights because you've done it for 9 years. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, Alex, are you doing any new plugins coming up? I know you're working for other people, but I was wondering if you're working on any new ones.
I do have a general idea for possible future products or ideas or things that could be commercial ones. I'm also trying to think about how to bundle all the ones that I've made already together to make it a little easier just to download some of them or all of them so that you don't have to go to 17 different places or 60 different places on my website to download them all. Especially you go to a new machine, you go, do I have to go back to that site and just click all those downloaded? So I am thinking about that. But unluckily for everyone else, I've actually got a good amount of work and I'm actually using that. But as soon as that dries up, I'll come crawling back to you all, desperate for your attention when it comes to making plugins for you.
You make great plugins, Alex. I mean, all your plugins. So here's one tip based on exactly what you said. I have a folder. It's called FCPX Effects. And every time I download a plugin, I put it in that folder. And that folder is backed up on my RAID and drives, and it's also available in Dropbox. Every time I download something, so I can just go there and I can reinstall one of your plugins. I really like the glass panel one that you had. I use that a lot, like the hazy glass panel thing.
Oh yeah, no, I was inspired because that was the new iOS hotness, was to overlay stuff and have a blurred, transparent background behind it. And I thought, yeah, I could do that. I know how to do that. And that's the weird thing about these plugins. It actually takes like half a day to do them, but it actually like a day and a half to actually write the web page and make some nice icons and do the screenshots and explain how it all works. But then
Exactly.
it's there forever. And knowing that it's helping people, it's just the feeling of not having. That's the thing as editors. We sometimes have people between us and our audience, collaborators, other people, idiots or fantastic people. And it's really fantastic when you're actually making something and that people are actually just using it and they can benefit from it a few minutes after you upload it to the internet and they're downloading it, and it's saving them 3 minutes a day for months and months. So
3 minutes a day. I've saved an hour and a half just using your grow shrink on some projects.
No, I do have ideas for kind of grow shrink, I guess, plus. Everything's plus, Apple Plus, cool. Disney Plus. Sure. So yeah.
Alex 4D Plus.
Yes, it's a subscription. It's just $100 a day. Yes, exactly. It's no, I mean that's the thing about me, and I'm using a slightly older version of Motion Final Cut because it's safer for broadcasters to use.
Sure.
Use a slightly older version. So when the new version come out, it's like, I look over to my spare machine and think, I'm looking forward to trying you out soon, but I have to get back to work. It's kind of like, no, there's so much we can do. There's so much. I'm very excited about the future, about what Motion and Final Cut. I don't think it'll just be a 10-year plan. I think Final Cut will be sold after the 21st of June 2021. And I'm really looking forward to the future of it. So getting over the bumps of the fact that Final Cut maybe is a little bit too valuable to people like Tim and these other people higher at Apple who don't actually know what Final Cut maybe is, but they know what it can do for them. It'd be nice to somehow do something about that. And who knows, we could all do it together, or who knows what we're going to do about that. And maybe that will kind of free up Final Cut to actually do a lot of good, different kind of good for Apple. It's not just about being pushed in this direction for various marketing and other kind of weird reasons. Because that's what it looks like to me when you see a feature concentrated on. You just think that's a nice feature, but I don't think it's for editors.
I will say this is just a general comment about the business of business. I'm expecting a period coming up that is going to last a while, maybe a year or something like that, of just a reordering of how companies think about business, because this has been big time transformative. I mean, you've got all these places right now, all these corporations. I mean, some of the bigger ones I work with have multiple floors of high cost, high square footage real estate, and there's nobody in them. They're just sitting there. And they are effectively working on Zoom now. And at some point, the bean counters are going to go, well, how many people do we have to move back into that? And all the building owners are going to have to figure out how many parking spaces do we really need. These are tectonic, large economic shifts that may be that we may be off on the very, very distant horizon, seeing the very small parts of the waves that are going to grow and wash over how we do things. So the companies who hire us and make our stuff are going to have to navigate those disruptions while we're getting toward the new normal. And so that's not insignificant.
Because I remember in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was in high school, they were taking this term called urban depopulation, which the centers of cities, people wouldn't want to live in them anymore. They all wanted to live in the countryside, and there was nothing in the center because it was all light industrial and nothing. So you would actually have nothing at all. It would be like south of Mission, or what's it called, south of Market in San Francisco, and it was just like it was like, don't go there at night. It was those kind of places, and big cities all over Europe and all around the world. And who knows what's going to happen to all those office buildings, how they're going to be converted into places for people to live. That's really exciting and fantastic. I certainly know one of the conditions under which I'll go and work for Apple is that I actually want to stay in London. So I'm sorry, that's just one of my number one things, I'm afraid. I know but why want to be in one city at all? Why not be anywhere? That's another way of looking at this in terms of location. But the flip side of all that is, I worked for 7 or 8 years full time at a job up until 2001. And even today, I miss aspects of that. The psychological aspects of being with people every day. And one of the psychological aspects of being with people every day is the fact that there's the unspoken appreciation, the psychology of somebody being slightly less worried when they run into a room and seeing that you're actually there and you might be able to help them. And they're not going to say it to you directly. You might, these days we get some nice, as freelancers, we get an email every once in a while at the end of a project, or maybe a phone call or a round robin or something like that. But it's the everyday feeling of appreciation, sub-vocalized through just expression changes and stuff like that. How to get that across, and so that we are fed those in our day-to-day lives. That's going to be having to turn to technology somehow as well to give us that. Because I'm used to, me and my girlfriend are used to working from home together for the last 3 or 4 years. And being together and also both working from home is a real skill that probably 0.1% of the population are going to have.
My wife and I have worked together out of a home-based business for 20 plus years now. And, it's a set of skills. You are absolutely right not to be able to navigate that effectively. And we've done great, but there have been these moments where I just want to go to the movies and just clear my head out. And that doesn't say anything about the other person or how much you love them or care about them, but you just have to negotiate what you need and what they need in terms of time on and time off. And, 24/7, 365 is a challenge for most people.
It's balance, right? Yeah. It's like we have too many contact with folks, and then we are all remote. Yeah. And it's not, we need context. I think it's balanced. This has shown us that we can have an opportunity to work differently, to live differently, and maybe some of us were just moving too fast, and this has helped us slow down. And so this is an interesting time, scary time, but interesting in that it shows us maybe that there is a way to recalibrate and have balance, because we can't all be remote and not have, like Alex was saying, there is something about, it's infectious, right? We're close communication or close proximity to each other. It's just the idea of bouncing something off of someone. I have this thought, what do you think? It's horrible. Or, yeah, that's great. And that's going to help me in my project. So those little moments you can't get, when you're all remote. So I think it's
because we've worked together for such a long time and a long thing. One of the things is if you're 24/7, 365 around somebody, neither of the two of you in a relationship, and I'm not an expert at that, but here's the deal. You're not bringing anything new back to add to the relationship. Yeah. If everything you are experiencing together, then you don't have anything to bring back and enrich and say, you'll never guess what I heard on my Zoom call when I was talking to Richard and Alex.
Also the absence and just having appreciation for that person when you come back, just being away from them, all those little things stacking that up.
Right. Absolutely.
So, the alternative is we all go into family law and make millions of dollars dealing with the breakups.
The wave of virtual divorce.
Babies and divorces.
Yeah. One of the.
I've been taken off her Zoom list.
We're not Facebook friends anymore.
Exactly.
So one of the factors, because my girlfriend and I have been together for over 20 years, one of the factors that helps is a lot of space. I have a 2,700 square foot upper floor and about a 2,000 square foot lower floor. Like right now, I'm up here doing this for hours. She's downstairs doing a yoga training session for like 6 hours downstairs. I don't even hear her. Yeah. She's down there, so space helps. Yeah, for sure.
Go to your side of the house.
No, we don't.
Well, I used to have the same thing, but we downsized significantly. I used to have an outbuilding that was my studio. It was a converted hay barn, and Linda had the house. And when we were raising our son, all the kids would hang out between the house and the pool, and I could still shut my soundproof studio away from that. Now we're in much smaller things, but it works just as well. You just have to adapt. It's not how much space you have; it's how you think about the space that you have. And there are ways to get away from it, but you just have to make compromises.
Hey gentlemen, I have to go. I have a conference call I've got to be on in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think we're approaching 2 hours.
Oh yeah,
one thing I want to say before you guys go, all three of you guys are the best. I appreciate all three of you, not Bill so much, but the other two. And of course, Serena, Bill and I, we've been friends forever. He's on so many of these chats, and of course, Serena is a good friend of mine. But I appreciate all of you. You're just the best for different
Richard.
reasons.
Thank
And we did the same thing for you, Richard. You put a lot of work into building
Yes.
this little corner of the internet where we can all get together and learn.
Thank you for this opportunity.
You think we're just sending out, but what's coming into us, I think, individually is every bit as important as what we're trying to curate and figure out the most important nuggets to turn around for an audience. We're also just absorbing. So thanks for the forum. This is a great thing to have.
And having fun. We learn and we have fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Say goodbye, everybody. We will. Alex, you have anything to plug?
Not at the moment. Go Alex for the Twitter account. And this is where I express my whatever my random thoughts are. So yeah, Twitter Alex 4D, but also Alex 4D the Facebook page, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway.
So Tangier Clark wanted to know the name of that Motion Facebook page.
So yeah, there's it's Apple Motion. What's the name of the Facebook group? I just have to actually go to it. Let's see, because people. Oh, it's just called Apple Motion. So there's a Facebook group called Apple Motion. So search for that, and then yeah, you'll be very welcome.
So we got three comments real quick. Thanks, guys, from Michael. Tangier Clark says, I appreciate all of you. I agree. All four of you are the best. And then we got a bunch of these from Joris.
We hope we've done something that helps you folks, whoever you are, a little bit get a little farther along, or at least feel a little more comfortable about this technology.
Very good. We'll be back on when 10.5 comes out.
Yep.
Oh, you mean on Tuesday?
Are you
Tuesday's
flying, Alex?
Tuesday is a good day. Look, they did Logic Pro on a Tuesday. They could very well do it on a Tuesday. We'll see. I think we'll see it before WWDC regardless.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.